Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're working on the 6500 watt Cat branded generator. Despite the branding, it is just a Honda clone. Now this machine does look to be very complete, looks to be in really good condition. No rust, no missing parts, no damage. So that just begs the question, why would someone throw this away? You know, my buddy Jason pulled it out of the trash, brought it to us. So I'd like to think it has a terminal problem, but yeah, I know better. Likely it is a minor issue and needs just a bit of work. So the goal today will be to get this running again, or at least find out why it was thrown away. So let me get you set up a little bit better and get going on this. So start with the oil. Make sure we have some. Yeah, we do have oil. It's down a little bit, but it is in the safe zone, and the oil color doesn't look too bad, so it should be fine to test with. All right, let's make sure the engine's not stuck. And it's not. It is rotating. It actually has very good compression and very low leak down. So the engine definitely should run, you know, as long as we have spark and fuel. Good. And speaking of fuel, the fuel valve's actually in the off position, so there is a chance the carburetor's in good shape. But I'm kind of getting mixed signals from this because I did try turning or rotating the valve, and it is stuck exactly in the position that it's in. So that is a bad sign. And there's actually a strong smell coming from this machine. It kind of smells like paint. Not varnish or paint thinner or even fuel, but it smells like paint. And that smell is coming, unfortunately, from the tank. You know, someone put something in here and it didn't agree with the tank. There is a bunch of sludge and I guess old fuel down in the bottom of that tank. So that is something we are going to have to deal with at some point. But for now, you know, let's make sure the core of the machine is good. So let's get the tank out of the way. Once everything else checks out, we will circle back and get it cleaned up. Well, let's see if we can get this fuel valve freed up because we actually need to rotate it to push it through. Otherwise, we're going to have to cut the line. So it is rotating, but it's very stiff. There we go. And I probably shouldn't have done that because now the carb might be getting fuel. But we kind of have no choice if we want to get the tank off. So I'm debating whether I should cut this line or not. Usually I would just cut it right after the fuel valve, and the fuel valve would hold back any fuel that's in the tank. My reservation is that this, despite the branding, it is just a Honda clone. And usually there's a 3/16 inner diameter line, and this valve I think is for 1/4 inch line. So the line that runs from the valve to the carb is likely a special line that reduces it from a 1/4 inch to 3/16. So I'm probably not going to cut it. I think instead, you know, let's get the airbox out of the way. That way we can disconnect the line right from the carb and just pull everything out without cutting any of the lines. I'm already not that impressed. This frame rail is right in the way of this bolt. Now, it's not to say you can't get it off, but using power tools, not an option with this airbox. I should say it is an option, but just not with that bolt. Or a deep well socket. Talking about making an easy job hard, this right here, this nut can't get a straight shot on with an extension. So if I go without and just use a small socket, still can't get in there. You know, I'm at a pretty steep angle. So let me try a swivel. You know, if that doesn't do it, then we're actually going to have to pull the engine mounts and push the engine out of the way of this frame rail. There we go. And of course, it's on there super tight. There we go. And this is what we're trying to save right here. Now that the airbox is out of the way, you can kind of see what I was talking about. This side of the line, it's 3/16 of an inch inner diameter. And the outer diameter is also much more narrow. Whereas this side, it is a 1/4 inch inner diameter. So you can see how it steps it down and basically converts from the larger 1/4 inch to the smaller 3/16. So the fuel valve should be off. And it is off, but there is some very old looking fuel coming out of there. And let's see if the valve even works. It turns much easier. Oh God, the fuel coming out looks terrible. So very, very dark, but at least, I was going to say, at least it seems to be flowing from the tank. But even that, I'm not sure of, you know, because the fuel flow, it is pretty slow. Anyway, enough of the tank. We'll circle back on that. But this machine doesn't look that old, so it's just hard to believe that, you know, something like this can happen in such a short time. And you can actually see there is water in there. The very top is fuel. But if you look just beyond that, you can see a water separation line. So it was water that did all the damage in that tank. I'm thinking, let's give this the benefit of the doubt. And we'll drain the carb out. We'll put some fresh fuel in there and just try to start it. Now, the drain actually wasn't that tight. So I'd say there's a good chance someone did drain this at some point. And nothing is coming out. So that's actually a bad sign because I did have the fuel valve on. And if you look at the end of the drain bolt, you can see some varnish and corrosion. So I'm thinking, let's not give this the benefit of the doubt because I don't think the needle is opening. So let's get the carb off, we'll get it cleaned up, and then we'll try to start it. Yeah, it looks like we're free. But we do need to disconnect the choke. For some reason, Cat decided to run a remote choke some, I don't know, 6 inches from the actual carburetor. So because of that, we have a wire coming over here. So if we loosen it up right there and probably just remove this bracket altogether, the carb should then be free to come out. Can't get a straight shot on that one. Wow, that is super locked in there. So I might need to rethink this. There is another bolt up above. The problem is that the control panel is kind of blocking access to it. And I'm thinking, given how this one is refusing to come out, we can probably remove the linkage here and slide this out. And hopefully that one breaks free a little bit easier. So how bad do you think it's going to be? I'd say not too good, because although I removed the drain and nothing came out, you would think the carb would be empty, but it's actually not. You know, when I shake it, I think I hear liquid actually sloshing around in there. So I'm thinking it's just so clogged that it can't get through the drain. Yeah, the color of the fuel coming out is pretty much the same story as what we saw coming out of the fuel line. Same smell. Smells like paint. And that is some bad fuel. No water though, which is good because the water would rust the carb out. So I'm hoping that it's just varnished. And yeah, a lot of junk in the bottom, and the drain is right here, and the pickup for the drain is probably in this area somewhere, and there's just a bunch of garbage in the way. So I think that'll clean up. The carb itself looks pretty good, aside from the very bottom 1/4 inch. So that should clean up. I think that's just varnish. This pin is not stuck. Needle's not stuck. And it looks pretty good. The main jet, I am willing to bet, might be stuck. No, actually it's coming out. There's the main jet. And the emulsion tube's also removable. There it is. Doesn't look great. There is some corrosion on it. Definitely some clogged or blocked holes, so that needs to be gone through well. Main jet, not seeing any light through there, so I think that is clogged. And lastly, we have the pilot jet. So we have to get out the idle set screw. And under that, there is a spacer. Just get that out of the way. And then the pilot jet. There is a tiny little hole, which usually clogs up before the main jet. So I'm guessing that this is plugged as well. So we'll run through everything. We'll get this soaking in the ultrasonic, and I think this carb should clean up just fine. Yep, plugged solid. Oh no, I bent my tip. That's how solid it is. So let me try something a little stronger. And we're not trying to increase the size of the jet here, but I do need the drill bit to scrape out the clog. And the flutes on the drill bit will help remove or pull that debris out. And there we go. And I'm kind of bummed about this. This tool has been a great tool for cleaning carbs. You know, it's a tapered bit for dental. So, yeah, I think I have another. So let me dig that out. I'm starting to panic, but I do have a couple more of this style. So for the record, this is what it is. Number 20-30 millimeter, made in the USA, stainless steel. And I think that's the key, because a lot of these other ones, they don't seem to be stainless, and they're not as strong. So we've got 2 left. Now we have 1. So if you happen to be a dentist, at least I assume you have to be a dentist to order this, let me know, because I need some. I think we're through. Carb cleaned up pretty well. So I think it's going to run. Question is, how well is it going to run the engine? So let's get it all back together. We'll get it bolted on, and we'll find out. We'll try to start the machine, and hopefully it runs well. And it's not seating all the way, so you do want to be careful that you don't leave it a little bit proud like it is right now, because that's going to be an air leak and it's not going to run right. So I'm going to get a little bit of WD-40 on here, and that should help this pilot jet seat. All right, that looks good. So the spacer goes on top and the idle set screw, which holds everything down. You know, in this case, we're not using it to idle the engine. So only turn it in until you see a couple threads poke through, but we don't actually want to use this to set the idle. Its sole purpose in this application is to hold that jet in place. So let's get this bolted back on and see what it can do. It's a pretty tight fit. So we'll get the choke reconnected. You know, it's actually spring loaded, so we kind of do need the cable. And we'll leave the airbox off for now. It might cause it to run a little bit lean, but usually the effect isn't too bad, so it should run pretty well. That is, if the carb is cleaned properly. It's taking a lot of fuel. I have a feeling we're going to be flooding over here in a second. All right, I take that back. The flow has slowed to a trickle. So I think we're ready for contact. Well, theoretically, we should be ready to go. We only need to pull the cord and probably apply the choke. Now, I am really interested to see how many hours are on this machine. You know, I don't think there's many based on a couple factors. I guess first, the emission sticker says 2019, so this can't be more than 6 years old. Also, the tank looked fantastic pretty much everywhere except the very bottom. So I kind of have a feeling someone bought this. They may have put just a bit of fuel in the tank, tested it, shut it down, rolled it into the corner, and then the tank went bad. Anyway, let's get it started and see how many hours are on this machine. Okay, good. This cat lives again, and it sounds really good. You know, the carb is running it quite well, and the generator is generating. So things are looking pretty good. You know, as far as the hour counter goes, it's low at 76, not quite as low as I had hoped, but that is still very low. I mean, this machine is basically brand new. So, you know, everything here I would say checks out. Really, the biggest issue we have to deal with now is that tank. So I'm thinking actually before dealing with the tank, you know, let's finish this up. We need to change the oil. We'll throw the airbox back on, probably clean this up a bit, and then finish things up with the tank. threads are a little bit chewed up on the end of the stud. So we have to be careful in putting it back together. We don't want to cross-thread it any worse than it already is. So I'm thinking before we clean this up, let's just get a better look at the starting point. Keeping in mind, this machine, it's only 6 years old. And you already got a glimpse of what we're dealing with here. But yeah, 6 years doesn't seem like a lot of time, but the bottom of this tank kind of disagrees. It is covered in rust, and we actually have the pre-filter right there, so someone pushed that into the tank. But the sides and the top of the tank, which is on your right, doesn't look too bad. So to clean this up, I'm going to use some nuts and bolts. We'll get kind of the big chunks out of there. Once all that stuff is out, we'll use some Evaporust to finish it off. So I think we'll start just by removing this fuel fitting. And we're actually kind of lucky this tank has it, because a lot just have a little pipe that's welded in. So by removing this, it'll give us a little bit easier time getting some of the junk out. Although the opening still looks to be pretty small. So I'm not convinced how well this is going to work, but let's drain out at least what's in there. We get the nuts and bolts in, shake it around, break the stuff up, and worry about how the chunks get out of there when that time comes. It's hard to determine even how to recycle this. I am allowed to recycle 5 gallons of bad fuel every year, or actually 5 gallons twice a year. But this stuff doesn't even vaguely resemble fuel. But that is the container I'm putting it in, so hopefully they take it. I've got the drain back in place, and I'm just going to cap it off. We don't want it to leak for the next step, which is going to be basically the nuts and bolts, some water, and a lot of shaking. That is really dark. Kind of looks like mud. So that's actually good news. It means whatever is in the bottom of the tank, it is coming off pretty quickly just with the nuts and bolts. So cleaning this out with nuts and bolts, it took a lot longer than I thought it was gonna. You know, the water went in clean and just came out very dirty. And it was like that, I would say, for a good 30 to 40 minutes. But we're at the point now where it is coming out pretty clean. So I think it's time to switch our approach here. But I do want to show you with the borescope kind of where we're at. And obviously not perfect, but it is a million times better than where we started. I would say the tank is usable in its current state. That said, though, I do want to make it a little bit better. So let's try to get that pre-filter out. And then I'm going to set the tank back on the frame. We'll get a couple gallons of evaporust in here and just give it some time to work its magic. Well, it's been a few days, and I think the evaporust has done what it needs to do. Now, it did darken up quite a bit, and that is a sign that the evaporust is pretty much spent. So I'm going to spend a minute, drain it out, and I'm going to rinse it out real quick and get some fuel in the tank to prevent it from flash rusting. So I've got most of the evaporust out, and now we can see kind of the end result here. You know, I still wouldn't say it looks like new, but it is a million times better and perfectly usable. So I'm going to spend a second and just mop out the bit of evaporust that remains, and then I'm going to flush the tank out with gasoline before filling it up. And I am going to replace the filter that was installed on this tank. Although the filter isn't torn and seems to be in pretty good shape, the actual O-ring that forms the seal, it's cracked all the way around and it's actually missing a few chunks. So although it's not leaking now, it won't be long before it does. So I ordered up a new one. This is the same type of filter that's actually used in the Honda GX390. So it is an easy part to get. And this one has a brand new O-ring. All right, let's see what this thing can do. According to the sticker, this is rated at 6,500 watts. So we're going to put that claim to the test. And I'm going to get the engine started, and while it's warming up, we'll double check the output using the kilowatt. We'll measure both the voltage and the hertz, and we can also see what the power quality is using the amp probe. That'll tell us the total harmonic distortion, and we have the oscilloscope to see what the sine wave looks like. Once the engine's warmed up, we're going to use the load bank to put on a half load, and assuming everything goes well, we'll bring it up to the max rated of 6,500 watts. So no issues getting the machine started. It started first full, and I'm testing this one off the tank. That is something I usually don't do, but given the starting point of this tank, I want to make sure that it works as it should. So without a load, the total harmonic distortion isn't too bad. It's at about 5 point, I was going to say 5.5, but it is fluctuating a bit. But yeah, it looks like around 5 or 6%, which isn't too bad. And the sine wave, it's a little bit jagged, but not terrible. So let's put on a half load, or actually a 3,000 watt load, because we can't technically do a half load with the load bank. So we'll start with 2,000 watts. No issues, although the dip was pretty big there initially. We'll put on another 1,000. So we're holding at about 61 Hertz, and under this kind of a load, the THD did jump quite a bit. We're at 17.7%, and the sine wave, not as jagged, but it is a little bit deformed. So we'll give this a few minutes. Assuming everything holds, we'll go for the max, the 6,500 watts. No issues at all pulling 3,000 watts. So let's bring the load up slowly. So we'll swap out 1,000 for a 2. So now we're at 4,000 watts. Engine speed looks good. Let's try 5,000, 5,500, 6,000. No issues there. So let's take these smaller loads off. We'll swap it out for a 2. So now we're back at 6,000 watts. We'll add another 500, so now we're at the rated load, and it's running just fine, although it is quite loud. And under its full load, THD came up to 20.3%, and the sine wave looks about the same. So So let's give that a few minutes, make sure there's no surprises. All right, no issues. Been a few minutes, so let's take the load off and we'll give the engine a few minutes to cool down and then we'll shut it down. So the cat delivered its rated load of 6,500 watts without issue, which I kind of expected because you only need a 399cc engine to pull that much. And they actually oversized their engine to 420 cc's, so there is a little bit of horsepower to spare. The voltage also did quite well. I think the lowest I saw was about 122 volts, and even under max load, we also held at about 59 Hertz. So all the vitals look pretty good on this machine. And really it should. This machine is not that old. The biggest issue it had was bad fuel. And surprisingly, it went very bad in 6 years. So I'm thinking, likely the fuel that went in there 6 years ago wasn't fresh to begin with. And then given a little bit of time, things went wrong pretty quickly. Anyway, I always get a little bit discouraged when I see stuff like this because changing out the fuel, it's not a difficult process. It's something I do on my machines twice a year. I just use these cheap siphons and it makes quick work of it. You just pull the fuel out, burn it in your car, and fill the tank back up with fresh fuel, and you're good to go for another 6 months. Anyway, this machine, it is back and doing what it should. So, I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.